So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development. And I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar focused on JavaScript Coding Fundamentals, and will be run by Eleanor Smith, who is the instructor of that certificate. So she'll be walking you through a little bit about herself, as well as some of what will be covered in this certificate. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all a treaty people. And I will let Eleanor introduce herself and share a little bit about her. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Firstly, feel free to add any questions in the chat if you have them. And you'll notice that if you pull up the chat, it will automatically default only to share your questions with hosts and panelists, but I would encourage you to drop that down and click everyone. I'm sure questions that you might ask might be relevant to someone else, so feel free to do that. And then I usually get asked this question, so I'll just handle it right up front, which is that if you would like to share this webinar or some of what's covered with colleagues, or you would like to rewatch it, we will be recording this webinar, and then before the end of your workday, we will be sharing an email. So keep an eye out for your inboxes or your junk folders, and there will be an email with a link to the certificate along with a link to the recording of the webinar that's on our YouTube channel. So you'll be getting that a few hours from now as well. So without further ado, I will pass it along to Eleanor.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for attending and hearing more about the course I designed. What I had planned today is I wanted to start with talking about who I am as an instructor, as that has had a major impact on how this course was designed. I want to talk also about the arguments for learning coding and why the JavaScript language would be a good language for beginners. I'll also talk about the organization of the course, what you can expect if you sign up, and then I'll conclude with why choose this course over all the other online coding course options that are out there. So a bit about me. I have taught a variety of technology subjects for both academic institutions and corporate clients. I have about 20 years of industry experience. So this JavaScript course focuses on front-end programming, but I've also done some other types of coding, such as shell scripting and back-end coding. The picture of me on this slide is what I consider professional and a personal highlight. I got the chance to visit Southern India to teach a software analysis and design course. These days, I'm pretty busy trying to complete my Master of Education degree. My final project is looking at coding as a literacy practice. And so if we think coding is a literacy, what does that mean? How does that change the teaching and learning of coding languages? So that's a really big interest of mine. So I'm really interested in looking at how we can design coding programs for people who don't identify as computer scientists or see themselves as technical people. Okay. And this is a quote from Mark Guzdial, and so this is also a theme in his research. And Mark Guzdial is a big name in computing education. He has written a book called Learner-Centered Design for Computing Education. And in his book, how he describes coding, he sees coding as being a core part of computing education. In his book, he provides the example of how children use code to explore other subjects, such as math. So here's this idea that we code to learn more about the world and learn about other subjects. He also sees coding as a way to facilitate expression, and it gives us new ways to communicate. So using HTML, CSS, along with JavaScript, we are able to communicate through the medium of visually impressive websites. So now I'm going to talk about the arguments for, for learning coding. At the top of the list is one of well, probably the most pragmatic reason for learning how to code is to increase your job opportunities. This was my main motivation for learning coding many years ago. I saw learning coding as a way to get a job as a software developer. I had graduated with a liberal arts degree, and when I graduated, I found that my job opportunities were limited. Learning code was a way to solve that problem for myself. The next reason on the list, and I want to acknowledge too, not everybody needs to learn coding to get a job as a software developer. This course might give you a way to increase your professional productivity. Many of you have no interest in becoming a software developer, but you may work on projects with other coders. So this class might give you some insight, maybe, and also the language to communicate more productively with programmers on your team. Then the next reason talks about coding as a way that gives you access to new ways to think. And that's something that was impressed upon me. While my main motivation was to learn coding to get a job, I realized along in the process that this is giving me access to new ways to approach and solve problems. I'd also spoken about on the earlier slide, coding can give us new ways to communicate and express ourselves. And this last reason is seeing coding as a way to support social progress. So 2 examples would be the Vaccine Hunters Canada and the Women Fight Back mobile app. And that was created by school-aged Indian girls. The Vaccine Hunters, the first example, the Vaccine Hunters Canada app extracted and consolidated health information from various websites that help many Canadians get the timely information related to getting vaccine appointments. The Women Fight Back mobile app was written by school-aged Indian girls. They had little knowledge of coding, but they recognized coding as a way to solve some of their local community problems. Women's safety was a big issue in their community. So they learned coding through building this Women Fight Back mobile app. And this mobile app allowed women to create alerts, make electronic calls for help when they felt their safety was threatened. So this slide, I've focused a lot on the general arguments for learning coding. Now I'll go into more specifics about the JavaScript language. So in most JavaScript 101 courses, one of the first points made is that JavaScript has no relation to the Java coding language. They are commonly confused by novices. Another key characteristic of JavaScript is that it works in tandem with HTML and CSS. And so JavaScript, along with those 2 other languages, plays a role in the front-end web development. So there's a great YouTube video out there that uses this analogy that these languages are the 3 amigos of web development. So we have HTML as the builder, the frame of your website, JavaScript, the wizard, that is the interactive element in your web page, and CSS as the style, as the artist that styles your web pages. And I will make the point too that this course focuses on the JavaScript language. So you won't be required to write HTML or CSS, although you will work with some HTML and CSS code. So now I'll talk a bit about why the JavaScript language might be a good language for beginners. So we have a quote from Douglas Crockford, and then we have this meme. And I think both of these, the quote and the picture, speak to this aspect of JavaScript being flexible and then having less barriers for getting started with coding. Crockford is a JavaScript guru, and he seems to be saying that he thinks JavaScript would be a good first coding language, as you don't need a lot of background knowledge to get started. And then in the meme, we see JavaScript being depicted as the rebel child. And I think this meme is speaking to the fact that JavaScript doesn't enforce some of the rules that other languages such as C and Java do. And one distinguishing characteristic of JavaScript is that when you declare a variable, you don't have to explicitly declare its data type. And then so that lends itself to some maybe more flexible and creative uses of coding. So a little bit about the course design. I've talked about how my academic research has influenced the design of this course. This course is also informed by other resources that are available on the internet. The text I used for this course is available for free. It's eloquent JavaScript and available online. I also use code examples from CodePen, which is a social coding network for front-end developers. Your assignments will be a JavaScript calculator program and a quiz program. And calculator and quiz programs are how people commonly use JavaScript. The focus on the course will be on the logical thinking, the disposition, the mindset, and the social connections that can help make us successful coders. And then here is an outline of the cognitive content that will be taught in the course. And these would be skills that would be taught in most coding courses for beginners, regardless on the coding language used. So we'll start with creating output or hello world statements, and then we'll work our way to be able to write decision-making and looping constructs. Each class, multiple techniques will be used that will include discussion and hands-on practice. And then I'll mention as well, if you want to go deeper with the JavaScript language, then there is another second 6-week. There's a second course, also around 7 weeks in length. And so I'm ready to wrap up, and I just want to leave you with some reasons as to what I consider to be good reasons for taking this course. This course has been informed by multiple perspectives. My academic research, that includes literacy and computing studies. It has also been influenced by my industry and teaching experience. In the classes, there will be effort placed into creating social connections in the class. So it's going to be a less lonely experience than the self-paced asynchronous learning experience. You will have the support of an instructor. And so this isn't something you would get in the equivalent LinkedIn Learning course. And I think one thing that I've been trying to say in this presentation, that I believe that learning coding is more than the acquisition of cognitive skills, although that is a big part. As the instructor, I think one way that I can add value is helping students work through the frustration that many students feel when they start to write code. And so this course requires no prior coding experience. You don't need any prior knowledge of HTML or CSS, although having prior knowledge isn't going to hurt you. So this class is suitable for those who are curious about coding, but never had a chance to experiment with code. And the last point that I'll make is that I think the best preparation for this course is a willingness to experiment and make mistakes.
Awesome, Eleanor. Thank you for covering so many topics. And I'm just going to jump in. I haven't seen any questions come through in the chat, but feel free to do so. And I'm just going to kind of maybe walk through some of the details. I did provide a link to the certificate in the chat here for those who are interested. The first course in this 3-course certificate begins January 16th. So you still have plenty of time to consider enrolling in the course and explore it. And there's more information on Eleanor and her background. As well, it's important to mention that, and some of you might be familiar with micro-credentials. And so in completing this course, you also have the option of earning a micro-credential. That's that's really a demonstration of your knowledge on JavaScript coding at a foundational level. And so that as part of completing the course, you will also have access to a micro-credential that you can include in a digital resume that you can share on your social networks. That's really a validation to your either your current employer or prospective employer that you have these skills. So I would encourage you to explore that link that I shared in the chat. And I see one of our attendees raised their hand. And so Peter, I'm just going to unmute you here and feel free to jump in if you have a question. And I think you'll need to unmute yourself there as well. Thanks. Hi, Peter, did you have a question? I see his hand raised. Oh, maybe it's included. Okay. I don't hear you, Peter, but if feel free to jump in there if you have a question. We do have two other questions. One coming in from Derek in the Q&A portion. Do you teach using Brightspace? And if so, is it possible? That's Eleanor, a question for you.
Yes, so yeah, we do use like the Brightspace medium, so like a learning management system. So yes, we use that. Generally, like there will be like live sessions. I'll probably use something like Zoom or Teams. As well, though, on the Brightspace as well. I mean, again, I'll have like activities and pointers to like to reading. So yeah, we do use Brightspace. Okay. I hope that answers the question.
Actually, I think it was Derek had included part of it, so I just want to finish the end of it. So do you teach using Brightspace? And if so, is it possible to include JavaScript through Brightspace?
What the last bit is at what I'm not sure what exactly does that mean. Like, are we talking about like the actual tools that we'll be using? Is that
Derek? Maybe I can unmute you to clarify your question, if that's okay. And oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
I'm just wondering. I'm a Brightspace developer, and I'm just oftentimes Brightspace will strip out some of the HTML code that I use. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering whether Brightspace, in your experience, will do that with JavaScript as well.
That's not where I actually have experience in, so I'm not able to quite answer that. So that's really if you want to put your JavaScript code within Brightspace.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, it very well may. I don't know. I haven't quite coded in that context. I think like in the course, we'll at least be building our literacy a little bit and knowing what to check. Okay. But if you do take the course and you're going to be doing some Brightspace development, you're going to be adding JavaScript code. I'd love for you to share that, and then we can kind of see how that works.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Derek. Appreciate you jumping on and clarifying your question. That's great. Peter, I'm so sorry. You're telling me that your mic isn't working. And so Peter was just asking what type of computing system is suggested.
Yeah, for JavaScript, as far as actually getting started, all you actually need is a notepad or the basic text editor and a browser. Those are the minimum requirements. I'm going to have a start in the first class where you're going to just use CodePen. And so again, you just need a browser and you just need to get set up, and then you're able to plug in your JavaScript code. I will add later on in the course, when we get comfortable, we'll be using a standard integrated development environment tool. But I'm going to start the course with us. We'll just be doing code using CodePen. So there shouldn't be a lot of like whether you have a Mac or a Windows machine. It shouldn't matter. You'll be able to do your work. When it comes to JavaScript, you've got a lot of flexibility on the tools that you use. But if you have a browser and you have a text editor, you're good to go.
Awesome. And just a question from Eutheny here. Do you need to know HTML?
No. And I'm somebody who had to learn HTML to teach this class. So no, you don't need to know that. So you will be working with HTML files. So because I'm not going to, it's like some courses are framed or you just focus on JavaScript and it's not connected to HTML. We're going to be working on applications though that have an HTML component so that you can get that that real world type practice. But you don't need to know it. You'll have to go in and edit certain points to point to your JavaScript, but that's about it.
Awesome. A question from Marianne here. Can Brightspace allow the use of JavaScript via an embedded tool? But I know, Eleanor, I think maybe this is referring to kind of the intricacies of Brightspace or the backend of Brightspace. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's more to the point that the course is being taught on Brightspace, but that it's not, you're not kind of embedding JavaScript code into the back end of Brightspace. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. Like how I use Brightspace, like every week there'll be a folder for the week's material. So there'll be like links to reading, just the PowerPoints, code examples, but you'll be practicing your JavaScript though, like on your computer, like using a text editor.
Okay, awesome. And maybe can you speak a little bit to the, okay, wonderful, thanks, Peter. Peter just added in a thank you into the chat there. Feel free to add another question. So I'm just going to jump in and ask a question myself. Eleanor, can you kind of speak to the time commitment for the course? I'm sure there are a number of people joining us today who might either be working, and I would just love for you to kind of break down for us what that might look like for someone completing the certificate and also working full time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the time that you spend on a course will probably vary from person to person, but I would expect though the time commitment, again, we'll have like 1 hour in class, and then you probably want to spend about 2 to 3 hours outside of class. Sometimes we get into courses and then we want to spend more time, but I would say 2 to 3 good hours should be sufficient for this class. And then also too, I don't want to be heavy on like assignments where it's, you know, we have to spend 15 hours.
Okay, awesome. And can you speak to just the textbook that's required for that first course? Mm-hmm. Where might they, and I suspect, I mean, if you do decide to sign up for the course, you will receive more information on the textbook, but maybe could you speak to why that was chosen and how that will add value to their learning?
Yeah, and so with the Eloquent JavaScript, the reason why I like that text, okay, one thing, the author gives a lot of moral support for learning coding. That's the reason why I chose that. When we read the introduction, the first thing one of the first things that he says, if you're confused and you're having trouble with this, you don't doubt yourself as a learner. So I like that text for the moral support that he gives. For this first class, I have you read 1 or 2 chapters in the book. Now, as far as the actual code examples that we work from week to week, those are examples I've already created, and I get code examples off of CodePen.
Okay, wonderful. Just have a colleague telling me that the chat seems to be disabled. So if you do have questions, you can also submit questions to the Q&A, where I think a lot of people have been adding their questions. So apologies if you're trying to submit questions into the chat. I'm not sure how that became disabled, but nevertheless, actually, just one sec. Let me just see here. I think I have fixed it. So if you want to submit questions, you can submit them to the Q&A and also to the chat. So I have fixed that up. Marianne has another question here. Is this the beginning of a series of micro-credentials in this area? It seems that I would need additional development to be able to consider a career move. So I suppose, and sorry, I misspoke at the beginning of the webinar. There are in fact 2 courses, JavaScript Coding 1 and then 2. So upon completion of this, of those 2 courses, you would receive a certificate from Dalhousie, and that would also award you, in addition to the certificate, it would also award you 1 micro-credential for that first course. I'm not sure, Marianne, perhaps Eleanor, you could speak to kind of, I know that this is, this provides a lot of foundational learning in JavaScript, but maybe you could speak to kind of the employability and what people might be able to do after completing this certificate.
Yeah, so with this first course, maybe this is just a chance to like experiment and see if you like coding. One of the things that I do think that it might add value is for people who don't want to have make a career change as a software developer. You just work on projects that involve software development, and you might have to get work out of coders. I think this course could be helpful for you. So this is a course where you can at least the first week, you can learn a little bit more about what coding is. And then if you really are interested, if you like it and you want to go in more of the specifics with the JavaScript course, then there is that second course, which goes into more of the technical details of JavaScript, like what makes JavaScript, like with a DOM, functions, arrays, and just the more like advanced features. But then certainly after that second course, there are other things to learn about JavaScript and its use in frameworks.
Okay, so just to maybe, oh, wonderful. Thanks very much, Marianne, for joining. She just included in the chat that it's been a worthwhile webinar, which is lovely. I've just included a link to the first course in the certificate. And then I'll also include a link to the second course that, so you'd complete the first course beginning in January 16th, and then the second course begins on April 10th. So you would have this certificate completed before the summer of 2023. And that second course is called Developing Software of Medium Complexity. So I suppose, Eleanor, is it accurate to say that this certificate would give you the tools, like if your role involves working directly with those who are very hands-on with JavaScript coding, it would give you the language, like it would give you the ability to work with them?
Yeah. I certainly see that being as one of the major benefits. And I guess my experience in industry is that there are a lot of communication problems because project managers, business analysts aren't really sure how to drive requirements or understand what their coders are telling them. I see that happening that a lot.
Right. And Kyle has a question here. Does DAL offer other computer science certificates? So I will include, just to your question, Kyle, I'll include a link to our Faculty of Computer Science website, so you can explore that in more detail. I wonder if, though, and this may or may not be relevant to you, Kyle, but I know, Eleanor, you also teach the Data Management for Professionals certificate. And that is a 3-course certificate. And I wonder if maybe you could just, for the benefit of this group, maybe share the distinctions between this JavaScript certificate as well as that 3-course Data Management for Professionals certificate, just so that people can get a sense of the difference between the two.
Yeah, so the data management course, so that is that's a broader set of studies than this coding course. With the data management, it's broken up into 3 parts. First, we'll talk about introductory to it's a context of data management in enterprise organizations. The first class is an introduction to what is data governance, why is it important. The second part is again more on data governance, and then the third course focuses on choosing the right storage technologies. That is again, that's a bigger like a broader course. It's a fun course to teach, and I've taught it through other continuing ed programs. But if you want to learn a little bit more about like data science and just best practices when it comes to data management, that's what that course is about.
Wonderful. And I will include just a link here, Kyle, to your question. And I hope that that will be helpful to you. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so please feel free to either raise your hand or add any other questions in the chat. And I'll pause here so people can type. So I did include a link to the data management for professionals, the other certificate that Eleanor teaches, in case that is relevant to your work.
The first class starts tomorrow night, so in case anybody wants to join.
Last minute registration. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, we are just 1 minute past our time. I think we'd set a little bit longer, but I don't see any other questions here, but I do just want to reiterate that there will be an email arriving in your inboxes just in the next few hours with a recording of the webinar, along with a link to the certificate, the 2-course certificate that we covered today in JavaScript Coding Fundamentals. That first course begins in January, so you do have time to consider it. And the email, will also include an email address for our student services team at openlearning@dal.ca. So if you have any questions about registering, they are happy to answer them. But also, if you would like to speak with Eleanor directly, I'm sure that we could connect you with Eleanor by email. So thank you so much. Thank you, Eleanor, for hosting today's webinar.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the engagement and your questions. Really appreciate it. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.